Wow, UFC 202. I am surprised, mother.
What's going on, everybody? Thanks for running the fast break with me. And, whew, boy, who saw this coming? I think the widespread belief was this fight would unfold in one of two ways. Conor McGregor would learn his lessons from the first fight, pace himself, and finish what he started in round one before he gassed out and got choked out. Or two, this fight would play out the same way. Conor McGregor would start out strong, lose steam, and Nate Diaz would take over in the later rounds. Mystic Mac is back. Well, kinda. He said he'd knock Nate Diaz out in round two, and when that didn't happen, it looked like he was done. But what a huge win for Conor McGregor tonight. I don't want to say he was on the cusp of becoming kind of like a Chael Sonnen when Chael was out there saying he was the best middleweight and that he dominated Anderson Silva after he lost twice. So certainly some of the mystique has been restored. And if you're Nate Diaz, this is not a bad thing. We all know McGregor-Diaz 3 is going to make him more money than any other fight that could have been out there had he won this decision. Let's say he did beat McGregor. Who's next? Is he going to fight Eddie Alvarez for the belt? Probably not. It's probably going to go to Khabib. And we all know Nate Diaz has said it before. He doesn't even care about belts. Tony Ferguson, Rafael Dos Anjos, they're tied up. Donald Cerrone, he says he wants a title shot. He can fight at 155 or 170. But the bottom line is none of those fights are as profitable or as high profile as that third McGregor fight. And two, you lost a pretty close fight. From what I see, so a lot of people online think Diaz actually won it 3-2. So when you replay those highlights, when the trilogy fight comes along, they're going to show replays of you getting knocked down a few times, but you choking Conor out. So even though it's 1-1, the Diaz win was far more definitive. Off the top, this is what I love about mixed martial arts. Before the fight, we saw what happened in the build-up. They were throwing cuss words and bottles and cans at each other, but afterwards, they hug it out, respect, good fight. So Conor McGregor won a majority decision, 48-47. I think on most scorecards he won rounds 1, 2, and 4. And some of those shots that he hit Diaz with, that would have knocked out 145-pounders. Probably would have knocked out most lightweights too, but Nate Diaz is the Terminator. So round one, Conor McGregor came out clearly with a different game plan. Some thunderous leg kicks to start off the fight, take some of that mobility away from Nate Diaz. It was very effective. Another huge difference we saw, Conor McGregor was not keen on landing that kill shot every time like he was the first time around. Unlike the first fight, you can clearly see that he was trying to pace himself. When he knocked Nate down, he didn't try to swarm in. Of course, part of that is he didn't want to get involved in the ground game either. And round two seems to be the only one where there is some difference in opinion in it. Started off very much the same way, Conor McGregor throwing leg kicks, but Nate Diaz really started to turn it up in the later half, and had he turned it up a little bit earlier, maybe 30 seconds to a minute earlier, he may have won that round. Maybe that's his game plan moving forward. Just start pressuring McGregor right off the bat, so that way if Conor's backtracking or circling away, it makes it harder for him to land those leg kicks. But as good as Nate Diaz was at the end, McGregor did get 2 knockdowns in round 2, so I think you would have to give it to him. Round 3 was all Nate all day, and this is when you said to yourself, it's deja vu all over again. Nate Diaz just had to hang on just long enough until Conor McGregor sort of blew his gas tank, and then it was going to be a wrap. And that's what it kind of looked like there for a while. Conor McGregor started doing laps like it was NASCAR around the octagon, looking at the clock. You certainly thought it was the beginning of the end. McGregor goes back to his corner. He looked tired. He looked exhausted. And a funny thing happened. Round 4 started, and Nate Diaz didn't seem like he was all there. It seemed like he was maybe distracted from all the blood that was coming into his eyes. And McGregor caught a second win, started taking control of the action, pushing Nate back. Very impressive how Mystic Mac was able to avoid some of those takedowns up against the cage. There were a couple instances where Nate really dug low for it, but just couldn't pull it out. So round 4, you think you have to go to McGregor. And round 5, we saw a lot of clinching going on. Nate landed a pretty good elbow, I remember. Conor had a brief takedown, but Nate got right back up. And then in the last 10, 15 seconds, Nate had a nice little trip. took Conor McGregor down. He was trying to start to pound away, but the horn sounded. And had he gotten that takedown a minute earlier, who knows what may have happened, but clearly round 5 went to Nate Diaz. Had Conor taken it 3 rounds to 2. Really looking forward to Conor-Nate 3. I think everyone is. And the UFC, they cannot wait. This has to be the next fight for both guys because, one, there's no logical opponent, at least not for Nate Diaz. Does McGregor really want to go all the way back down to 145? It's a really tough cut. And if we're talking 2 fights from now, that could be 6, 8 months, maybe even a year. It'll inevitably lose some of its luster. And why? Just so we can see McGregor Aldo 2? This is what you do. Trilogy fight taking place next. McGregor can vacate the belt. Aldo can have it. And after that trilogy fight, he can go back down to 145 and try to claim it if he wants. But if he beats Nate Diaz, then he pretty much gets an instant title shot at whoever the 155 champ is. And call me crazy, but I can't be the only one who thinks this. I think when their fighting careers are over, 5, 10 years down the road, Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz, I think they could actually be friends. Here's an idea for a show. Conor and Nate looking for a fight. Who wouldn't want to watch that? Let's move on to the co-main event. Anthony Rumble Johnson knocking out Glover Teixeira with a just vicious right uppercut 13 seconds into round 1. And I have no idea what Glover Teixeira was thinking. Why would you want to pressure Anthony Johnson in round 1? If there's one fighter in the UFC that you just want to say, you know what, I'll throw in the towel for round 1 just so I can feel things out, that's Anthony Johnson. But he went right after him and got caught. And Glover had no idea where he was because afterwards he was, after he woke up, he tried to execute a double leg takedown on Herb Dean, I think. So after the fight, there was a little love fest between Anthony Johnson and Daniel Cormier. Anthony Johnson saying, "Daniel, you're the man, but I'm coming." Then you had Daniel Cormier getting booed by the crowd, clapping his hands, pretty much saying, "Bring it on." And of course, he's loving it because he's going to get paid, and B, it means he wouldn't have to fight John Jones. But I'm thinking the UFC probably has other ideas. They're probably praying right now that John Jones comes back before the end of the year so that they can do Cormier versus Jones 2. And as tantalizing as Rumble's power is anyone really all that excited to see Cormier versus Rumble 2? We saw in the first fight, Rumble caught him clean with maybe his best shot. Cormier not only recovered, got back up, he ended up cruising to a victory in that fight. But clearly, Jones-Cormier 2 is the bigger fight with the storylines, the bad blood between the two. So I think the UFC is going to do everything it can to wait, hope John Jones can come back in time, and then maybe Rumble can fight the winner of the two. And before that fight, Cowboy looking pretty sharp at 170 again, knocking out Rick Story with a Street Fighter-like combo. You press the punch, kick, punch, kick, punch, kick. And afterwards, Cowboy says he wants to drop back to 155, fight for the belt against Eddie Alvarez. Who knows if that's going to happen. Maybe he's just sort of putting it out there now that he's going to be a free agent. One thing from the prelims I do want to talk about, the choo-choo train for Cody No Love continues, rolling on after a knockout win over Takeya Mizugaki. And is he ready for Dominic Cruz? No. It'll look like a matador in a bull. But I think the UFC has to put that fight together because there's just no one for Cruz to really fight right now. Dillashaw-Garbrandt is a sexy matchup, but I wouldn't do that. I would probably have Dillashaw fight a lesser opponent so he can get a title shot after that. This way, you have Cruz versus Garbrandt. You get a fresh matchup in there, and then you have sort of the next title fight after that pretty much set with Dillashaw versus the winner of the two. So those are my thoughts on UFC 202. Leave a comment, subscribe. Let me know who you thought won the fight, and I'll see you next time. From Who to You, I'm out.